In this video, I want to show you some features of layers that we didn't discuss last time, namely blending modes and opacity changes. We talked about opacity changes, but we want to use it in context with the last assignment, colorizing your image. And so blending modes are really powerful tools. They allow you to take what's on one layer and blend it with another in kind of this mathematical way, I guess the best description. So the first thing to add color to this image, and so if I wanted to colorize this image, the first thing you do to add color to it is it needs to be a color image. In other words, if I go under image mode, notice it says grayscale, and that just means there's no color information, and it looks gray because it is gray. If I wanted to add color to it, I do need to change the image mode to RGB color. That way you can actually display the color. In grayscale, even if you added a color to it, it would render as gray and you won't be able to see any color. So I'm going to choose RGB color. And now you won't see any change because it's gray. The image is gray. So what I want to do is add a new layer. I'm going to click my layers icon over here. And I want to pick a color. So on the very left-hand side of our toolbar, we have our foreground color and our background color. And you're always painting with the foreground color when you're using Paintbrush to either add color to your image or to work on a layer mask, which we will get into. You're always painting with the foreground color. If I click this foreground swatch here, I can choose a color and click OK. Now I'm actually painting with that color. So again, it doesn't hurt to confirm that you're on a layer that's not the background, because our approach, and this is beating a dead horse, I'm sure, is non-destructive, which means I want to be able to undo anything I've done at any point that I have this file. Whether it's open or not, I want to be able to come back to this image and make adjustments to it. If I edit directly on this layer, I have to go all the way back to the original image and import it if I still have it. So again, non-destructive editing is the way to go. So what I want to do is, just to illustrate blending modes, I'm going to set my brush here to hardness of 100, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint. Now, again, you're thinking, wow, that's really awesome. That's the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Well, here, before I get into all that, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. All right, we don't have to paint that center part. And I'm just going to do a little of this so that you can get the idea. Under the layer menu associated with this layer, each layer can have its own blending mode and opacity change. I'm going to choose the blending mode, and I'm going to go down to the bottom here. If I can get to it. It's off my screen, but it says color. Notice that the color blending mode has changed the image. You can see the original image through it, with my opacity still set to 100%. If I change it to multiply, if I roll over any of these, you can see the effect of what's happening. So you get a quick little preview of that as you roll over it. So some blending modes will do exactly what you want them to, some may not. My recommendation is to experiment with these just to see what happens to your image. Maybe it'll give you the effect that you're looking for, maybe it won't. You might have to use a combination of a couple different layers with blending modes. And so basically, we've set this one to color blending mode, and it's going to colorize the image. So if you wanted to change the effect, you can change the blending mode. You can also lower the opacity to fine-tune that effect. So we have this blending mode set to color. I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer. Click yes. And then what I want to do is I'm going to add another layer here. Doink. And I'm going to go ahead and use my rectangular marquee tool, which I know you guys are pros at. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill this. Actually, I'm going to do a couple different things. I'm going to fill it with like we did last time, red, green, and blue. So 255, 0, 0, that's red, obviously. Okay, I'm just going to put all this on one layer real quick. Red, and we have green, 0, and then we have blue. So these are the solid colors. Blue, we have 0 and 255. Cool. And I'm going to deselect that. So we have these swatches here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this. This is normal. Now this is just for, I'm just illustrating, how these blending modes work and look and how they affect the image below. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. If you want to duplicate a layer, you can actually right-click on it or control-click on the PC, or I'm sorry, the other way around. Right-click on the PC, control-click on the Mac, or you use your right mouse button if you have one, and say duplicate layer. And then I can say, I'm going to say multiply. And the reason why I'm calling it multiply is it's a blending mode that I want to show you here in a second. Again, duplicate layer, screen, and I'll do one more. I'm going to do it this way. This is an alternate way to duplicate a layer. Drag that layer onto the new layer icon at the bottom of the screen, and you can duplicate it that way. Again, double click it, and I'm going to call this one overlay. So these are blending modes that you really should get to know. So I'm going to move this one down. That one's overlay, then screen, then multiply, and boom. Okay, so we have just those 4 blending modes. So let's go in. I'm going to go ahead and change this one to overlay. I'm going to change this one to screen. I'm going to change this one to multiply. And then this one obviously is normal. So if I go in and, that's the normal one, I take a look at some of these other ones, like screen and even overlay, you can see that there's a slight difference among the images, among the layers, the way they affect the images below. And so when you're changing the blending mode of something, you choose a blending mode based on what you're trying to achieve. So the thing to know is multiply will always darken. So whatever color or value is on the layer set to multiply, it will always darken the layers below it, and that's this one right here. Okay, so you can see it darkening the image below. Screen is just the opposite. It will always lighten what's below it, and that's this layer here. So it will always lighten. So multiply darkens, screen will lighten. Overlay kind of does a little bit of both. If it's middle gray, it gets ignored. And so let me show you that. I'm going to set this back to normal. And what I'm going to do is put in here, we're going to put in right across here. A couple different things. All right, so here I want to go ahead and set that to 50%, 0. So this is middle gray in Photoshop. And so here what I want to do is I'm going to set that to black. And then here I will go ahead and move this down. And I'm going to set the bottom part to white. Can't really see it, but it's there. So you can kind of see a white bar. Okay, so with overlay, let me turn it back to overlay. Sorry, it's scrolling off the screen here. And I'm going to turn these other layers off just so they don't get confusing. All right, so we have on this one, we have some color information. And we have our gray swatch, our black swatch, and our white swatch. What happens is overlay disregards gray. So this one right here is right, pointing with my left hand, you can't see my hands. This gray here becomes transparent. And so it'll darken and lighten based on what it's seeing. Okay, so notice here as I move it over, that appears to be transparent. This doesn't change anything. And that gray will not change anything. So if you have a layer set to overlay and it has gray on it, you won't see any change. Middle gray, 50%. If it has black or white, it will darken or lighten depending on what you're trying to achieve. So the way that works, or what that looks like, is I'm going to go ahead and hide this layer. And I'm going to go ahead and create my little burn and dodge layer. Okay, I'm going to set it to overlay. Actually, first I'm going to fill it with some color. Under the edit menu, we have edit, fill, and I'm going to say 50% gray. Can't see anything until I change the blending mode to overlay. Notice when I go over multiply, see how it gets darker, or if I go over screen, it gets lighter. Overlay, it doesn't do anything. But if I take my paintbrush with a nice soft edge brush, and this is one way to burn and dodge. I'm going to lower the flow so it doesn't come out so quickly. If I want to burn and dodge on an image, I can use black and white paint to lighten or darken the image. So in other words, if I use black, it's darkening. If I switch to white, so this little swatch here are your default foreground and background colors, black and white. You're always painting with the foreground color, so we want to switch it. You don't have to click on this to change it. Just click on this little swap or switch icon right there. The shortcut is the letter X, which toggles foreground and background. So all I'm doing is hitting the X key, and it's toggling foreground and background. So that comes in really handy when you're trying to burn and dodge. Here, if I want to dodge the center part, again, using the bracket keys to make brush a little bit smaller, and then switching to black, I can go in and then, burn and dodge on my image here, depending on whatever I'm trying to create. Bring out some of the values here, and lighten some other things just to draw interest. Here, if I want to go over it, lighten it up a little bit more, I can get a big brush and just go in and start painting. Just a little bit smaller, bring that back down. So without that, you can see a little bit of a change. The burn and dodge layer, what it looks like is this. It's very exciting. And so, but you can definitely tell that it's affecting something. Now, if you want to fine tune that effect, we just go in here and lower the opacity of that layer, and you can really dial in that burning and dodging effect. So this was just an introduction to layers and blending modes, and kind of a little bit of a tangent, give you a little bonus action with the burn and dodge, using overlay and black and white paint on that burn and dodge layer. We'll see other ways to burn and dodge and lighten and darken certain areas as we progress. That should do it for now. See you next video.